The village of Bhairavpur remains isolated, its social life dictated by the crumbling haveli on the outskirts. Villagers avoid the property entirely, driven away by the rhythmic sound of phantom footsteps echoing through the broken windows. Reena arrives in Bhairavpur to visit friends, armed with a total disbelief in local legends. When her friends challenge her bravery, she accepts a dare to cross the property line and enter the house alone. Inside, she sweeps her flashlight across the decaying walls. A second shadow, one that does not move with her, shifts against the cracked plaster. From the empty space in front of her, the distinct, heavy sound of approaching footsteps begins to close in. She sprints back outside to her friends, shaken but physically safe. By breaching the threshold, she unknowingly released the entity from its structural cage. Local lore often serves as a survival mechanism. Dismissing these warnings as superstition provides the exact trigger required to awaken a dormant threat. The phenomenon moves into the village proper, finding its first host in the local labor force. Raghu, a barber, becomes the initial point of contact as he walks home after dark. Walking an empty road, Raghu hears footsteps perfectly matching his pace. A pale entity with glowing green eyes confronts him, promising that his time is up. By morning, Raghu's sanity is gone, leaving him to wander the village muttering that the footsteps are coming to take him. The threat then moves to the village's intellectual defenses. Anirudh, the schoolmaster, who rejects all ghost stories, is followed by the sound of heavy, invisible boots on a paved street. Logic fails to protect him when an audible whisper. Domestic safety is compromised next. A woman named Savita goes to light a daily lamp in her courtyard. A sudden, violent draft extinguishes the flame, revealing a dark figure in a black sari standing in the corner, whispering grim warnings into her ear. Religious intervention also fails. When the local priest attempts to chant protective mantras outside the haveli, bloody warnings appear on the stone walls, physically repelling his efforts to exorcise the site. The entity finally breaks the geographic boundary of the village. Amar, driving an empty bus on a highway miles away, sees a faceless passenger in white sitting in the back row. The entity taunts him through the rearview mirror before vanishing. This map tracks the path of the Aahat as it jumps from the haveli to the streets, the schoolhouse, the private courtyard, and the transit lines. By systematically infecting the workforce, the intellectual class, the home, and the transport routes, the entity behaves with the precise efficiency of an epidemiological outbreak. State authority arrives in the form of DCP Arvind. He treats the reports as mass hysteria, intending to provide an empirical solution to the village's panic. Arvind enters the haveli alone with a flashlight. His skepticism vanishes when heavy footsteps echo on the staircase, and a disembodied voice commands him to descend into the cellar. Facing a threat that defies law and logic, Arvind forms an investigative unit. He recruits Reena, who first disturbed the site, and Anirudh, the master who witnessed its reach. Together, they enter the haveli at midnight. Investigating a terror of this scale requires combining the perspectives of the one who triggered it, the one who tried to rationalize it, and the one tasked with policing it. They force open a rusted iron door at the back of the property. In the moldy basement, they find a fresh inscription written in blood, cursing anyone who hears the sound of the footsteps. A pale mist forms in the corner of the cellar. The spirit of Lalita, the former mistress of the house, materializes to confess a crime committed a century ago. Her husband buried her alive in the cellar to seize her wealth. Her frantic pacing in the dark and her dying screams became the source of the auditory trap. The entity retaliates as the truth is revealed. The basement walls shake and heavy dirt and stone rain from the ceiling, forcing the investigators to scramble back up the stairs. The entity projects the sensory trauma of her final moments directly onto the living. The sound of her pacing is the actual haunting, a repeating trap of her final claustrophobic minutes. Arvind applies a logical deduction. If the tragedy is anchored to the physical remains in the cellar, destroying the structure should theoretically sever the spiritual connection. The group takes collective action, burning the haveli to the ground. The fire consumes the ruins, intended to liberate Lalita's remains and end the curse through physical destruction. The next morning, the village gathers at the smoldering ruins for a mass prayer. The panic subsides, and silence finally returns to the streets of Bhairavpur. We often attempt to solve abstract problems with physical solutions, assuming the demolition of a crime scene equates to the eradication of its consequences. Days later, the threat appears finished. Reena sits at her desk, studying in the quiet of her bedroom. A sudden freezing draft blows through her window. Then, from the darkest corner of her room, comes the unmistakable sound of rhythmic, pacing footsteps. The curse bypassed the physical architecture of the haveli entirely. By hearing the footsteps, Reena and the others provided the entity with a new environment, their own neural pathways. The Aahat is a psychological parasite. Destroying the physical source cannot save a mind that has already been infected by the sound of fear.